On radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side, and joining us as they do every single week to talk about the week that was in Michigan athletics. And there was a lot. I mean, as the coaching search, coaching carousel turns, it's kind of driving the discussion here here the last couple of weeks, and it will again today with the MGoBlog Roundtable. So, first of all, good morning, fellas, and let's start one by one with welcoming you. Starting with Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Good. Everybody on the coaching staff is younger than me now.
So you're to that point, right? Crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. All right, and of course, Mr. Seth Fisher. How are you?
Morning. Happy Valentine's Day. Roses are red.
And Craig Ross, who was like, how's the weather where you guys are? It's great where I am. That's how he started off the morning. Craig Ross, how are you?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to troll you. The weather here is nice, but Brian, you'll figure it out. At some point, the whole world is younger than you, and that's it happens.
That just means you're seasoned. There,
seasoned,
Craig. You're seasoned. Yeah. You're veteran. You're aged. You're not old.
That happened to the Craig sometime during the Bronze Age, where he looked around. He was like, "Oh my god."
So, fellas, last week we were having this discussion. I wonder where you guys are with this. We were talking about Clink, and Brian, I think it was you who said, "Well, can you come up with a way for him to maybe be the understudy to Wink, right?" And it was a great idea. It was the kind of thinking that you would have had to have to massage what was clearly an issue, that he felt like he was passed over. So how are you going to address that as Sharon Moore, right? Because he had told the players he was coming back, and I know he told at least a couple of them, they wouldn't waive my buyout. So you could feel that it was still going to be a thing that wasn't just going to go away because he signed, because he's going to remain. And then, I talked to him Friday, and it was clear, that was an issue. And by Saturday, he went in and he told him, "Hey, I'm gonna go." And he told me the one thing that I can share, because it was a conversation, it wasn't an interview, so I want to be careful. But the one thing that I know he would let me share is, it's not about the money with me. He said that like 20 times. It's not about the money with me. And so I just feel like, and I felt like this, and I told him this, it is probably going to be better for both sides if you go and Sharon goes in a different direction. That's ultimately what happened.
Well, I mean, I've said this before in other contexts that these buyouts, if you're only staying because of buyout, how much do you want that person? And that's why I've never really been too enthusiastic about buyouts. Number one. Number two is, I feel like employees, people should be allowed to work where they want to work. And if they don't want to work here, if they feel there's a better opportunity, I have no, issue. I was hoping we could say it was the Wink and Clink show out of Brian's sort of thought last week, but not so much. On the other hand, it looks like maybe we got some good replacements in the fold. I'm kind of excited about the new coaching staff.
Yeah, but we definitely need to do a postscript, because I thought I hadn't really thought about how he was going to try to massage it, Brian, and I thought your idea was a good one. That wasn't anything that I had heard from inside, but it was like, it kind of makes sense to do it that way. Oh, sorry, Seth. I'm sorry.
My idea.
So Seth, it was a great idea, but it was never going to work. It was never going to work.
Well, I mean, it was going to work for a second, but then apparently not. So I don't know. Like, the only problem I have is that, he tells people he's coming back. He tells the team he's coming back, and then he's like, "Nope, 180." I'm like, that's not great,
Yeah, that's not.
Yeah, but what's done is done.
I can appreciate what he gave us, and it feels awful losing a coach because then you're like, oh, we're going to lose all his recruiting and all those connections and all this and all that. And then they get the new guy and you're like, oh, yay, we're going to get this, we're going to get that. And they've done I think Sharon's done a great job in filling these positions. It looks like there's definitely some money being put towards the staff that I don't even know we were expecting them to like outbid Tennessee for Brian G. Marie. Like that's like having events happen like that makes me feel a little bit more confident about where they're going. I know they went with a couple of younger guys for defensive tackle, for defensive line, and for defensive back, and we'll get to those guys. But like, if Klink didn't want to be here, he was going to be miserable. That was going to be very different than what he was like when he was gunning for a defensive coordinator job. So if he wasn't going to be the defensive coordinator and he was going to be miserable and he felt like he wasn't going to get there, you were going to get a different coach than we had before. So I don't think that you expect the level of coaching we were getting from him, the level of recruiting we were getting from him. We've banked most of what he gave us. I don't think Will Johnson's going to leave. I don't think that the connections in Ohio are going to go away because Michigan's natural recruiting territory is Ohio. So I don't think that it's not like a devastating loss. It's a loss, but it's not like something that, oh no, our program is not what our program was a couple of weeks ago kind of loss.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that that you had the potential, not exodus, but the potential impact in players as they were pondering whether to stay at Michigan or go to the portal. That that was more of an issue with Elston than it was with Klink. That's not to say that every guy doesn't have other considerations for whether or not they go to the portal, but Klink wasn't one that was a catalyst for any of those guys. So so how do you pivot? You come up with a list of good candidates, I think. And Stephen Adegoke was the first one that I mentioned because his was the name that I heard first. Now, for folks who aren't familiar, Steve was a GA for the 2021 season as they were installed, the Mike McDonald install of the Raven system. And he came to Michigan from being a GA for Ron English at Florida. And from before that, he was a safety. He was a DB for Ron English at Mississippi State. So I say all of that to say, this dude really knows ball. He's at San Francisco as a QC, quality control guy, for 1 year. And D'Amico Ryans takes him with him to Houston, Brian, to be the safeties coach, not the corners coach. He takes him with him to be the safeties coach. And to me, that's very telling.
Well, I mean, the guy's 28. Like, he's basically Alex Drain's age, which is unfathomable.
Alex Drain is 3 years younger.
Yeah,
I know. I know, but it's not that different.
Alex Drain is the age you were when you started MGoBlog.
Shut up, Seth. That is violence against me that you are committing. Anyway, so that's a quick rise, right? And to go from a Michigan GA to an NFL position coach in the span of like 3 years, that's impressive. And that guy's going to be on his grind, right? Like, one of the concerns with bringing in Wink is if he was going to bring in some NFL position coaches who just didn't want to recruit. And Sharon Moore was like, no, we're going in the exact opposite direction. We're going with guys who watched the Usher halftime show at the Super Bowl and didn't recognize any of the songs.
Wait, what does that mean? I didn't.
From the other direction. From the
Oh.
other direction, not your direction, Craig. They're too young. They're not too old.
Okay.
They've never downloaded any of those songs on Napster, which I have all of them.
So it's, a very young and a hungry staff, and then you have your sort of experienced defensive coordinator who knows everything that you need to know. and can teach guys, and then you have a bunch of guys who are going to go out and recruit. So I think it's about the best case scenario, stipulating that you're losing the entire defensive staff.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about Adegoke is the fact he's come so far in such a short period of time. And I mean, here's a guy who's 28 who's already held, numerous jobs, and they all have engendered greater responsibilities. He's gone along. And so a safeties coach in the NFL is a deal. And so this certainly feels like a great hire, particularly when connected to Martindale, who's not, older.
Yeah, I think first of all, this Matt Zenitz guy is plugged in the NFL circles. Like every NFL thing he's kind of been on. I had the Wink Martindale thing after the Joe Cullen thing, and he knew about Wink Martindale. He knew about Sean McGee, and then he put the piece. He put the piece with Adegoke out. Steve hadn't even told D'Amico. Like he hadn't told D'Amico Ryan yet. I was like, how does this guy up on it like that? And so the word I got was that D'Amico was gonna try to keep him. Now I don't think that I'm not saying that to say that I think it's gonna be derailed, but it's just more of an endorsement for this being a dude. If D'Amico, when he hears about it, it's like, hold up, wait a minute. No, I don't want you to go. And this is a first year safeties coach, right? So, that goes to show you that, Sharon hasn't identified just, these are all like up and coming guys. And the guy that he had to beat out, and I'm curious you guys' take on this, because I really started to think while things were leaning Steve's way, I was like, man, I could really see Lamar Morgan coming up and taking this spot, because that was the guy that Jesse recommended. That was the guy that Jesse was going to hire if Klink had left, if he were still here. And so you had that kind of recommendation, and he's coached under Jesse, and he's been and he is a coordinator. So he's, he hasn't just run a whole secondary, he's run a whole defense. It just really seemed like, man, that guy could really, really rise up. And from everything I heard, Sharon and Wink did the interviews together. I heard that both guys smashed it. So whoever you wound up between those two, even more of a reason to believe, guys, that you're going to be winding up with a great candidate.
Well, it's great to have people on the bench. I mean, it's great to have interviewed someone. I've been there on interviewing people, and it's great to be in a situation where you've got somebody else you can, go back to and say right now, hey, this was, you're more than a viable hire for us. Because my guess is, given the quality of people they seem to be bringing in, they're going to be hiring people in the future again. So
yeah, I mean, Morgan, remember he coached under Minner, but it was at Vanderbilt where Minner didn't get to do a whole lot of Ravens stuff because it was just he inherited a mess there, and he was like, okay, here's where your foot goes. It wasn't like he was teaching high level concepts that Michigan was going to run. I mean, Morgan would have been a good hire, but he did a really good job at Louisville. Adegoke seems like a guy who's just completely on the rise. When it reminds me of when they got Mo Linguist, a different spot on the trail, but a guy everywhere he shows up, people are like, okay, this guy, right? And Linguist eventually got over promoted to head coach before and took the Buffalo job, which is not going to go anywhere. But now he's the defensive backs coach at Alabama. So I think that Adegoke is a rising star. You better lock him down so you have him for like 3 years, because someone's going to come. This is not his last stop as defensive backs coach at Michigan.
Oh yeah, I think I think you're looking at this staff as, to the point that you brought up last week, Seth. You're trying to identify guys who are, really good candidates to be the next one. Because, I think Wink is here for 1 year. I think you could. I think it's probably a couple of years, but hey, it could be like he comes in and they smash it, right? He could be right back, being a hot NFL commodity again and be out. Do you have the guy in house that is ready? That Sharon is ready to take over. I think if Jim had stayed, it would have been clean in Elston, but the dynamics are different with a first-time head coach who is, I'm going to spend most of my time on offense. I need a guy over there that's kind of like, there's not their first rodeo. Well, maybe the dynamic is a little bit different if you are after you're in year 2 for Sharon Moore, and who knows, would that open the door for an Adegoke, or as we see things play out with Brian John Marie, no official announcement yet, but that's a guy who's called the defense before, right? And so you would have some natural candidates in house that could conceivably take over, and I think they have to be very intentional about nurturing that.
Yeah. What is the story on John Marie and Scruggs? I mean, is Scruggs here? Are those certainties? I mean,
Scruggs is here. Scruggs is here. With BJ, I just think it's a matter of, I think there was something. I think you have to. I don't want to say too much.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I think my gut would tell me that you got some contract things to work out, and then he's the type of guy who would want to tell his players in person before it was. I don't know. He's just that type of dude. Like, he wouldn't want to have any stories out there about what he was going to do before he had an opportunity to tell his dudes face to face what he was going to do. So that, knowing him, that's how I interpret the silence right now. I don't interpret it as, oh, they're swinging him. I think there's a reason for the silence right now. So
okay,
get you off the hook on that one for a second. Like, going back to the idea of like who's your next defensive coordinator, because you do want to set up the guy after Wink, because Wink's not going to be here long term. They do have quite a bench right now, and the bench includes guys who are in the NFL who might not work out, or Minter might get offered a head coaching job. Like, there's a lot of things that can happen in football in a couple of years. But if you want to be intentional about it, you're going to have a defensive line coach. You're going to have a linebacker coach. You're going to have a DB's coach. It's really about, you got to see those guys coaching first. This is not the kind of thing you can decide right now when you're hiring them. It's the kind of thing that you look at your guys when you have them and see how they're recruiting, seeing how the players are responding to them, seeing how, and there should be a time when, Sharon Moore got an opportunity to be head coach a few games without Harbaugh, when Harbaugh wasn't there. Like, that's the kind of thing that you need in order to just have someone be an heir apparent. You don't just be like, okay, that guy, when I hire him, he's going to be that guy, unless you're hiring someone specifically with that on the offer.
I mean, I'm not going to think about what's happening a couple of years down the road, because there's so many moving parts that it's like trying to predict the weather 2 weeks out. It's very difficult because anything could happen. So what's important is that Michigan's defensive staff looks to be mostly settled pending what happens with Jean-Marie. And they avoided the pitfall of going too hard into the NFL. They have a couple of guys who look like real up-and-comers. They have a couple of guys who've been successful in their previous stops, and that's about all you can ask for. And one of Harbaugh's great strengths is that he kept hiring guys who got hired away. Like, when's the last time an Ohio State coach under Ryan Day left for a promotion? Right?
Halfley.
Sure, and he was there. Yeah, he was there for like a year. It's not like he came up under Ryan Day. So, what Michigan has been able to do is that they are a springboard for coaches, and that will continue to attract talent if guys continue to get hired away, because they're like, well, Mike McDonald was the defensive coordinator at Michigan, and a few years later, he's the head coach of the Seahawks, or Jesse Minter is now defensive coordinator in the NFL. guys come to Michigan and they leave Michigan, but the overall state of the program remains good. And, you know, we're probably going to have a step back next year because we won the national championship and a lot of guys are going to the draft, and that's fine. But the foundation of the program has been finding guys a little bit off the beaten path, recruiting in that like area of like 8 to 10 most years, which has not been a national championship winning team, and then making that up with development both in S&C and in off the in on the field position coaching. And I feel like they're in a good position to continue doing that.
Amen. As do I. Incidentally, Scruggs when he was at Cincinnati seemed to develop a lot of defensive tackles and defensive linemen. And my guess is, you know, it's harder at Cincinnati than Michigan. So that's good. What do you guys think of Kasula? I actually believe I had a beer with him a couple of years ago.
Yeah. So Steve, you know, I've been so wrapped up with with all of the you know, movement that is yet to be determined, that I haven't spent enough time talking about Steve, who has a great reputation in the state. Well, for whatever that matters to people. The coaches in the state like him a lot from his time at Ferris. He was really super present on the recruiting trail, to the point where when he got the Michigan job, I was hearing from coaches across the state like, man, love this hire kind of thing. Now, you know, it wasn't sexy to fans because he's attached to the Gaddis era, which I think that, you know, if you had JJ McCarthy as the trigger man in 21, I think your appreciation for what that passing game would be a lot different. It'd be a lot different. Steve was a big part of that because he was Gaddis's sort of right hand man, analyst guy, knows the offense, knows Michigan. I think is able to slide in seamlessly, and is gonna, if you can project what he was on the recruiting trail for Ferris and his reputation here in the state, excuse me, among high school coaches, if you can project that out, he's going to be a really good recruiter. Now, you know, we'll see. It was at a lower level. It was in the state of Michigan, so you can't really say for sure what it's going to be, but I think it's promising what his reputation was at Ferris, and then the fact that he comes in with knowledge of the offense already. And he was a play caller at Boston at UMass.
Yeah, I mean, it's telling that when Don Brown left, he was like, okay, I want my offensive coordinator to be this guy who's your analyst, right? Like, of the people that Don Brown took when he went and took the UMass head coaching job, you know, you can offer people an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator, and to take an analyst, that says something about the analyst. My one question for Kasula is, where were you for the Army game in 2019, and what did you say about it? Because that's like the one disaster of an offensive game plan where it's like,
there were several. I think I remember that you put in a season preview. You put somewhere, like, I think it was a UFR you did, that like Gaddis had like 4 of the worst RPS scores in our history.
Yeah, yes, he did.
I mean, it was like, all due respect, Sam, I've charted a lot of offenses, and I thought Gaddis was just a paper tiger. Like, he talked a lot of stuff. And
I thought his passing game in 2021, I thought it was outstanding.
Well,
outstanding.
The
unrealized, because you just weren't able to capitalize on enough of it, unfortunately.
Well, that's part of the deal. I mean, if your players can't, if you tell your players to go out there and be like, okay, you know, you have to be able to read this end and make this play when you see him do this, and then he doesn't do it 8 times, that's on you. You have to coach the guys you got.
That's the point of 21. Is he made that adjustment, and they went to the Big Ten championship and won it at the playoff, because he got away from look, my stuff is getting guys open. We aren't executing to, okay, he can't do this consistently. I got to run this rock more. We're in the Rutgers game. We can't complete a pass. We got to run the rock. We're in the Washington game. We can't complete a pass. We got to just run the football belligerently to win this game. That was the pivot. That was a sort of the maturation of it's not about my stuff. It's about what they can do. He could do enough of it for them to beat Ohio State, win the Big Ten championship, and go to the playoff. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah. Well, what I like about Kasula is that he's coming in as a tight end coach, but he was an OC at Davenport, small school, but OC is OC. He was an OC at UMass and did reasonably there. And he was an OC at Big Rapids where they did very, very well. And so I like bringing in a guy at tight end who also has a history of being an offensive coordinator. I also liked that Ferris State staff. For whatever reason, they would come to the coaching clinic here in Ann Arbor, and my brother and I always went out with them late at night after the sessions were over, and they were a really good bunch, I felt like. And so in any event, I'm kind of happy with this hire. I think it may work out quite well.
Yeah, so I think Steve was a great alternative because this was an example. They took a shot at Kevin Coger, and he's like, man, I'm not coming back to college when I got a pro option, which is what makes this Steve Adegoke pull. That's what makes that even more impressive. I don't think D'Amico Ryans is making that easy. Just let him go. Like I think that's one that that's a young up and coming guy that folks that I talk to believe that he can be a DC very soon. Like he could be on the Jesse Minter trajectory as far as moving up the ladder. So we'll see. But Steve, this is that was an example of, all right, you got your board and you're ready to go right to the next guy if your board gets, or your top guy gets taken off the board. I think this was a pretty, the offensive staff, that was always going to be the easier one to figure out. It was the defensive staff that was going to take a lot of rigorous sort of, I got to talk to Wink, I got to talk to Mike, I got to talk to Jesse. I got to talk to all these people to try to come up with an effective board. Because I made this point the other day, guys, and I wonder if you can go with it. There's a lot of things that 38, Sharon has proven 38 is not an issue. He showed you he's got command. He's shown you he can run an offense. He's shown you he can run a team, right? 38, though, you don't have a Rolodex that is as deep as some of these other guys, and you don't have a brother who's coaching the Baltimore Ravens. So, when you got to build out a defense, that was going to be the question. How effectively were you going to be able to put together a board quickly? And I think he's shown the ability to do that.
Well, doesn't Michigan have a Rolodex now that's pretty damn deep? You got Mike McDonald, you got Jesse Minter, you got John Harbaugh, you got Jim Harbaugh. I mean, you got guys all over the place, and I suspect all of them will be open to Sharon.
It's working both ways, though. Like one of the reasons that I'm worried about Adegoke leaving in 2 years is because Jesse Minter might be like, "Oh, you know how to run my defense, do you? Well, I need a guy." Right? Like there's a lot of people now. McDonald's got an NFL program franchise. There's two Harbaughs in the NFL.
I'm sorry. Contact list. I'm sorry. List of contacts. No 38-year-old according to Ferris Scott has a Rolodex. They don't even know what a Rolodex is. He's exactly right. But you get my
fair point.
Get my point. So, all right. We need to get to a break as I'm looking at it, seeing if I'm over time. And I am. So we'll get to this break. We'll come back on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket.
It was 2021 Northwestern, by the way, Brian, when I said
on the radio.
Okay.
And it was, some of the other ones are 2013 Michigan State, 2013 Nebraska, the Penn State game, the 27 for 27 games on there. 2010 Purdue. Yeah, there's some ugly ones in there. In the TCU game when they would not run play action, it's another one. So yeah, that the best all time were Penn State 2022. 2019 Michigan State for some reason. So he's got a couple impressive ones in here. 2016 Hawaii was really high.
I mean Hawaii though.
Yeah. I don't have some of your newer charting in here, so I don't have like the 2023s in there.
John asked and answered. He said no. He said no like 5 times. And he's been asked.
Who said no? What?
Vance being analyst. He's asking
Oh.
like 5 times. And he's retired, man. He's got a 91-year-old dad. You know, he's has a chance to spend time with his wife, who he hasn't really been able to spend off seasons with for what 40 years. So he's happily retired. He will be up. He's committed to coming up for a couple of weeks in the summer to work with them, I think he's probably going to come up some in the spring as well. So, but he will not be an analyst.
What's the deal with Mike Hart? I mean, there's been no noise on that one at all, and he's been invisible.
So it's not protest. He is in a contract negotiation, but he has some personal things he's tending to, and that's really as far as I can go with it.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like I don't take that as a sign that he's definitely gone. I don't take that as a sign that he's definitely staying.
Okay.
He had a contract negotiation, and that was paused while he's tending to personal matters, and then we'll see how things go when they pick back up. So, you know, but I think people were reading a lot into the fact that his contract expired. His wasn't the only contract that Jim that expired. Ron Bellamy's contract expired. Grant Newsom's contract expired. He let all those contracts expire. So, you know, I don't think that in and of itself was telling, but he was negotiating when, you know, he has some. There are a lot of things that we don't get to know from a fan and media perspective, and so
that's true. I mean, Hart, you know, coaching part of it aside, he's an important person to the Michigan fan base. So I hope he knows that everyone's behind him.
Back on radio in about 20 seconds, guys.
I get the, and I'm not talking about you, but he keeps coming up in the chat. He keeps coming up on the message board. Mm-hmm. My answer is going to be the same. Yeah. Like, you know, we gotta just wait and see how that plays out, and know that there's a plan either way.
Stand by, guys. Coming back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Mr. Ira Weintraub on the other side. Before we get back to the MGoBlog Roundtable, want to let those of you who are in the market for a new vehicle know you should get on board with Brighton Ford. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD to make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. That's where John Cuter and his crew will take great care of you with deals that can be beaten. Deals like the one on the 2023 F-150, $237 a month with $3,500 down, or $364 a month with $500 down. How about the 2024 Escape ST line all-wheel drive, $161 a month with $3,500 down, or $287 a month with $500 down. And last but not least, the 2024 Edge SEL all-wheel drive, $189 a month with $3,500 down, or $312 a month with $500 down. For those and other great deals, get on board with Brighton Ford. We're calling 1-800-NEW-FORD to make it out to the lot at 8240 West Grand River Avenue in Brighton, Michigan. So, fellas, NIL, I have made it a point, certainly as it related to a couple of players, to say, hey, there needed to be a deep sort of mental shift or evolution about what it's going to take to be effective in this space when it comes to retaining a player the caliber of JJ McCarthy. One more year fund is not enough, right? It was great. One more year fund that got those guys to come back to your prior, but there needed to be a deeper understanding of what the need is. And it feels like this poaching it's a combination of poaching and shopping. You got other schools poaching, you got agent shopping. Both of those things are going on. Your only insulation, your only protection from that is you had better be up to the plate from an NIL perspective with deals that will make the guys feel like they're whole. And so I got to say that the collectives have really stepped up. They have really stepped up in a meaningful way to protect this roster. It wasn't the only thing, but without that step up, you would see guys in the portal already. Now we got 8 days left in this portal window, and so far it's been holding. You can't get complacent and say that everything is locked in stone, but they've been doing pretty good so far, man. And I think the collective response to protecting the roster has been a major part of that, which leads into what we heard yesterday was this partnership with Learfield, and I can't remember the name of the company, Altius, to put a NIL GM on campus to help enhance NIL opportunities for student athletes. I wonder what you guys made of that announcement yesterday.
Well, it's good to hear that something is happening, that they have hired McGee as sort of the general manager leader in that department, because that's not something that Sharon Moore should be doing. He's got plenty on his plate already. It feels a little bit late in the game, which I think has been affecting Michigan's recruiting efforts. But as you mentioned, nobody from the current team has hit the portal who was a major contributor. They've lost Jaden Smith from the recruiting class. But in terms of we had a coaching turnover, they've really held it together. And so hopefully they can get through this last week without taking any hits. Because, I mean, basically, as soon as Harbaugh left, every message board for Alabama or Ohio State or Tennessee or Texas was like, let's pick off this guy, this guy, and this guy, and this guy. And you saw how Alabama's roster got rated.
Yeah.
Right? They lost a ton of guys. And
Caleb Downs, of all, like a true freshman who was incredible for them. Like that is,
yeah, they lost a ton of guys and they took a big hit. And then, they had their offensive coordinator immediately leave for the Seahawks job, and they only announced it after the portal had closed, which is like. And then they said that the Seahawks said they waited to announce it so that the portal had closed for Alabama players. And I was like, if I'm an Alabama player that stayed, what am I thinking?
Right.
Like,
O-line coach too, by the way. The O-line coach left too.
Yeah, and like if I'm Jalen Miller, I'm like, what? So, and now Nick Sheridan is the offensive coordinator at Alabama, which is wild. And we'll see how that goes. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is really the offensive coordinator.
Kalen DeBoer's running that offense.
He's the nominal OC now. In any case, for Michigan to come through this without so far having lost a major piece of next year's team is an accomplishment.
So far. And, except for Jaden Smith, then I guess they lost Joey Velasquez, right? But that's more of a baseball.
I mean,
thing,
that's not like, I mean, I was talking about guys like, Reese Atterbury transferred too, but those look like extremely normal. I'm not going to play here. I need to go somewhere else transfers.
Yeah. Morion Walker is really the only one I think that, the NIL thing came into play but he's a backup. I'm not sure that you're going to get the 1 more year fund to, go all out to keep a guy because he's got a huge ceiling. And, he made a career decision and that's going to affect him down the road. But that's the kind of guy we've lost versus there's no Caleb Downs. We haven't lost Mason Graham. And what I was terrified was about you heard how much LSU offers Bryce Underwood, who's a freshman quarterback, right? There's no guarantees on that guy. And the amount they're offering him, I'm like, what if someone offers a defensive tackle who It's going to give you 1 year and completely change the look of your defense because like a Grant or a Graham can do that for you. And if we're able to retain those guys and step up to whatever Oregon or Texas or Ohio State or any of those teams we're willing to pay one of those guys because their value is actually there, that is a sea change in what our expectations for Michigan's NIL program have been.
Yeah, and so this, what I took from that yesterday, the most meaningful part is that they have gotten into how do you make your student athletes, how do you increase the opportunities, not just by putting deals in front of them, but allowing for the appeal and the execution of deals to be a thing that lures more into the fold. And so I thought the part that was most profound was them talking about getting into content creation. I think that if you're talking about how you hook a company and keep them, it is creating opportunities for them where it's not just a kid going and making a tweet. Now there are going to be some donors who just want to donate, who just want to contribute to NIL to sustain the program. But what you'll find with a lot of these businesses is, well, they actually want some ROI, right? Okay, what do I get for doing this? Is there some tangible benefit from having an NIL partnership? And I think the content creation space is something that I did with Will. He had a couple of local business partners here with the local tourism bureau, Destination Ann Arbor, and
Will Heinegger, you mean?
Will Johnson. Will
Will
Johnson.
Johnson.
He had Destination Ann Arbor. Yeah, Golden Limo. These are companies that it's like, okay, what can we do that, getting an NIL partnership with him that's different. And so we got a film crew together and filmed him going to 5 places in Ann Arbor or Washtenaw County that he likes, that are, kind of that speaks to who he is, where he likes to go. And each business was able to get a like a promo out of it for their social media and content for their websites. It was, so the tourism bureau is like, man, this is like a tour guide through Ann Arbor. It's that kind of thinking that it sounds like they're getting into with this CE or this GM coming in and pairing and help facilitate partnerships between the collective and Learfield and other companies. If they can do more of that, create more opportunities like that, I think it's going to help grow Michigan in the space.
Well, Brian actually suggested a GM on radio about 4.5 years ago. And my friend Dane Myers sent a letter.
How do you remember that?
I do remember it. And Dane Myers sent a letter to the athletic department saying, among other things, you need to have a GM to deal with this because it shouldn't be up to the football coach. But we're finally there, I guess. Yeah. There's also some room.
By the way, this is a different GM. This is Sean McGee is the GM of the football program. Okay. The GM that I'm talking about, this Altius employee, who's going to report to the athletic director and assistant athletic director. He is a GM that is over NIL, period. That's all he does is NIL, and for all sports and not just football. So so we're talking about two different. I want to make sure that people understand we're talking about two different GMs.
Okay. Sure. So, I mean, I'm glad we're there. I mean, it seems like there was also an announcement. I think you made it yesterday, Sam, that some big donor has stepped up. I don't know.
What I said was when Sean McGee, when it was reported that Sean McGee was coming back, I got a call from a football donor, said I'm ready to write a check right now, and the proposal is already on the table for a high 6-figure commitment, and I think Sean coming back has a lot to do with that. So that's how I know. Like, I know he's going to impact NIL because he already has relationships with a lot of the money people, the football money people. Anyway, he has relationships with all of them. So that it stands to reason that he is going to help mobilize those relationships in a more efficient way than we've seen it mobilized up to this point. So I think it's definitely NIL positive. And I think it speaks to the broader organization that of the personnel department. I mean, Sean's going to be over NIL. He's going to be over the recruiting department. He's going to be over the player personnel department, which is also in the scouting. And all these people are going to report to him. And then he kind of brings Sharon in, because it's like a general manager running a roster in the NFL. You got to be like that now, right?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding, at least as of last year, and this is always a moving target, is that Michigan has actually already been way ahead of most schools as far as creating real NIL opportunities. I always kind of split them into two: NIL and quote NIL, right? Quote NIL is just doing business the way that that Alabama's been, Georgia's been doing, Ohio State's been doing for ages, where you pay the players under the table out of a slush fund. The NIL, the real stuff, is what Michigan has been way out in front of, because they had to, because they didn't have an operation that they could just port over. I think that our understanding before all this opened up was that there were a lot of Michigan people who were willing to write a check for the football program that would probably go into some sort of fund that can just pay out every year, right? I'm talking like a security, right, where you could use the dividends to pay the players every year, and the fund could just increase and increase and increase. And there's still been no talk of that kind of thing. I don't know if that's even possible at this point. Where are we looking? What direction is this all going?
Well, I think the NIL that you're talking about to help, the NIL you're talking about, I think is going on to help protect the roster. Now that there's still, it's not like that is just, hey, I just want to support the program because I love the program. I think us people who aren't millionaires maybe project our what we would do, what we think we would do if we had that kind of money. We kind of project that on to people with money, when the reality is they do want something back for it. And you gotta figure out how to satiate, how to meet that. They might want access. They might want, fingerprint access to Schembechler Hall. They might want to be able to come to practice anytime they want. They might want to come on the team plane. How much of that are you willing to do? Because that's the way the game is played.
If they want to call it the J. Ira and whatever family defensive tackle room this year, I'm down for that. I'll put that in Hail of the Victors. Like, why are we the names on buildings should stop at Michigan, and all that kind of money should just be going to a fund.
I'm just saying
that they could just pay out of.
I'm just saying that Jim was on board with some of that. He went over. He slowly got on board with more of it. I think initially, it was like, hey, man, these dudes can't just be showing up in practice whenever they want. But
I don't want the dudes in practice. I'm saying names on things. Like, start naming things.
What do you think happens? And man, you don't think dudes at the SEC are in practice whenever they want to be, or the team playing whenever they want to be? I mean, come on, man. That's how. What do you?
I know, and I've had a Georgia friend walk me through their stuff, their real thing before, and like a lot of it is because there's a lot of cash businesses down there because there's not construction down there, and I don't know. I want to get too deep into the woods here, but in construction, they don't work in the winter. They officially don't work in the winter. They do jobs outside of it, and they do cash jobs, and then they have a lot of cash floating around. And that's where a lot of the money for Georgia's program specifically, and probably a lot of the other SEC programs too, because there's so much building going on down there, has been going into these programs in the last 20 years or so. Michigan does not have anything like that. Like our tax laws are not the way their tax laws are.
SEC football is essentially a money laundering operation.
Yes. Yes.
I hadn't thought of
it. Go under or through the churches. This is not news to anybody, by the way.
Well, hey, there's no money laundering going on here. But what I can say is they have stepped up. For as much as I talked about, hey, where's the NIL money cannon when it comes to, businesses kind of lining up to get with Bryce Underwood, as much as I talked about it with JJ McCarthy, I think maybe that was part of maybe missing an opportunity there. And I don't want to sit here and make it sound like he would have definitely come back. I just think that a more comprehensive and a more lucrative a deal if it had been started, early in the season as opposed to after the year was over. And I think there might have been a chance, but whatever that was, they have really stepped up. They have really stepped up in this moment to help protect this roster. Brian is right. I mean, you look no further than Alabama to see what can happen, and that hasn't happened here as of yet. They got 8 days to keep protecting it. So,
yeah,
there
it's
you go.
time for our basketball segment.
And we're out of time. we really are out of time on this week's roundtable. We'll get to some basketball next week, I'm sure, and probably the conclusion, or definitely the conclusion.
Oh, that's a strong maybe, Sam, on basketball. Strong maybe.
I hear you. And of course, the staff should be totally complete and announced by next week at this time, so we'll be able to talk about it then. Until then, thanks a lot, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan